for the $29 for the park assessment. They also pay a lot of money, hundreds of thousands of dollars in some cases, to companies that provide tests that students can take on the computer along the way so that when the students do take the park, it's not going to be a surprise, right? So essentially what you have is two different levels of testing. You have the park assessment, and then you have these other companies that are jumping in and selling tests to our schools that our kids take very frequently in order to give feedback to the teachers so that the park test won't be a surprise. So this testing industry is obviously a lot of money. And then you see other things like, I took this picture of this complete Common Core State Standards kit. Everything you need to display the standards for second grade. It's not a very big box. But when teachers see this, when schools see this, what they see is the answer, right? The silver bullet. This is what I need in order to implement these standards that we don't understand and prepare us for a test that does not yet exist. And so I can tell you that school districts across the country, including our local school districts, are spending a great deal of their money and their professional development budgets to hire consultants, to bring people in at thousands of dollars a pop in order to prepare teachers for implementing the Common Core. So this isn't something that just changes the way people teach. It changes the way that states, schools, districts, principals, teachers spend money to prepare, right? And so that common market is essentially created that opportunity. And those people who are profiting off of it, many of them are also those venture philanthropists that we talked about earlier. They created the market and now they're selling to it. The worst example, and this one's really scary, is In Bloom. I don't know if anybody in here has heard of In Bloom. It's not in Arkansas yet. It's in 9 states. But In Bloom is a company that was created with $100 million from the Carnegie Foundation and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, again, Bill Gates. And its purpose, according to In Bloom, is to help states and districts record student information, administer tests, analyze performance, train teachers, and share lesson plans to support personalized learning. It's essentially a data warehouse. It collects data, it's stored on a cloud that's run by Amazon. It's analyzed by companies like eScholar and other companies. They feed that data back to In Bloom, and then In Bloom then takes that data and sells it to its corporate partners so that those corporations can make money off of your kids. And they collect upwards of 400 data points on students, including student names, test scores, home addresses, grades, disciplinary and attendance data, economic and racial status, and whether or not a student is entitled to special education, English language learner programs, or other like 504 accommodations. And so essentially because this was also, by the way, a part of Race to the Top. In order for states to get a slice or get some points on the Race to the Top application, they had to adopt a way of storing and analyzing data across the state for these sorts of purposes. Well, once again, those people who have created this market have stepped in with In Bloom, and they collect this data in the way that they support that company. They charge schools and states to store it and analyze it, but then, much like other people that store our data online, they sell it to other people so that they can in turn sell things to us. And here's the scariest part about it. The scariest part about it is that the federal government has changed the FERPA law so that it makes it all legal. It used to be that FERPA, which is the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, was supposed to restrict the release of private information without the consent of the parent or eligible student. Now, there's some people who are exempt from that. Those people would be school officials, principals, other people that work for the district. Well, Arnie Duncan and his corporate cronies were pushed to change this law that then redefined the idea of school official to include contractors, consultants, volunteers, and the ever important other party. So in other words, those people that work for In Bloom and all of these other corporations are now considered under FERPA to be school officials, and your child's data can be given to them perfectly legally without your consent, and there is nothing that you can do about it.
like the NSA.
It is, and it's not in Arkansas yet, but if this system becomes successful, don't be surprised if you see it here. I'm wrapping this up here, but one of the things that I think is important is that we talk about economies of scale, and we talk about free market, and we talk about education reforms in terms of implementing free market principles, competition, and other things on education. And I'm all for a free market. I love living in this country. I profit from the free market all the time. But I think the one thing that's important to keep in mind about this is that this is not a free market that's been created here. This is an artificially generated market created by politicians and the rich people that own them. In other words, this market has been built by those people with a lot of money and those people who want to see this market built, and then people are profiting off of it. And the federal government has been a willing, if not even active partner in this by changing laws, by having this race to the top program. All of this they've been complicit in all of this. And so while I don't believe this is driven by the federal government, I really see this as being driven by those people who want to profit off of all of this. The federal government is definitely on board with it. And really, the way that Obama and Duncan justify this is that the idea of Common Core state standards and the idea of common education is that those kids who are in poverty, they are supposed to see education as a way out. And so what Duncan and Obama believe is that if every kid receives the exact same education, then every kid will have the exact same opportunity. Now, the problem with that, as we know from those of us that study this sort of thing, is that there's a high connection, a very strong correlation between a kid's socioeconomic status and their test scores and their education. And so to simply provide them with this common education without trying to address any of the other problems that come in high poverty areas outside of the school is essentially just addressing the symptom without actually doing anything about the disease. And that's something that fortunately the federal government has not tried to do yet, because they would guarantee you screwed up even worse than they screwed this up. So, like I said, I'm almost done here, but if the Common Core doesn't work, one of the biggest fears that I have is, well, who's going to pay the price if this doesn't work? And essentially what we've done is we've taken this 90-degree turn in education towards the Common Core state standards at full speed ahead, like I said, and our kids are currently taking these classes, and they're learning under Common Core, and if this doesn't work, then unfortunately what we've done is taken these guinea pigs and we've changed their education for a certain period of time, and they will pay the price if Common Core fails. And for parents, there's no way to opt out of Common Core. I've read online about people who ask to be opted out of Common Core, and they ask to be opted out of tests. As far as I know, there's not a school in a Common Core state that's not doing something with Common Core. Although I would tell you that if you really want to get away from Common Core, move to some of the more rural parts of Arkansas, because in those places they're not doing much with it yet. But here in the Big Four in Northwest Arkansas, there's no way to get away from it. And that goes for the tests too. I made some inquiries into the Arkansas Department of Education about what would happen if I opted my kids out of the benchmark test or the future part test. And what I was told was that there is no opting out of those tests. In some states, they actually threaten kids with special education services if they don't take the test. In other words, they threaten kids with a federally protected program if they don't take the test. And schools are very much within their rights to place your children on remediation plans if they don't take the tests because they don't have the data. So in other words, you as a parent have absolutely no right whatsoever in the state of Arkansas to not have your child take that test.
But there are people that don't allow their kids to take them in Arkansas.
Absolutely.
So we do have the option.
And we need more of them. You have the option, but just... But I guess what I'm trying to say is that the right district...
Both of these girls are graduating high school last year and this year, and they have never taken it.
In the right situation, the state of Arkansas and the districts would have legal means by which to place your students in remediation programs if that were the case. And so while While it certainly is people, there certainly are people that are opting out. It is a situation where opting out at the wrong school or in the wrong district could put somebody in those legal crosshairs. So that doesn't mean that it's illegal to opt your kids out. It just means that the schools have a recourse to if you do. So when it comes to the future, what is it that we could do in the future? Well, some state representatives and different legislatures have actually passed laws to repeal Common Core. The only one that's been signed into law at this point is in Indiana. There are still 5 states that have not joined Common Core. You can see Missouri's passed the law, hasn't been signed. The House in Pennsylvania has passed it. There's some that have been introduced, and then a number of states in which the law has failed, including Alabama 4 times. So there are some states that are trying to retake control of this. When it comes to the park assessment, which is what Arkansas is participating in, the park is in trouble. And when I say it's in trouble, I just mean that reports are that the creation of the assessment itself is not going very well, and that some states have dropped out of the park assessment. As of this point, we have Pennsylvania is putting its participation on hold. Indiana, Georgia, and Oklahoma are out. And park is in deep trouble in Florida and Ohio. And that's a lot of this because they just rolled out that price of $29 a kid. That's a lot of money for a test. When you used to multiply that by the number of kids in your district, I mean, you can do a lot of things with $29. An art teacher in Kansas told us recently that they spend $6 a year on art supplies for kids in their district. They spend 5 times that. They'll spend 5 times that on the test. So the House of Representatives, our National House of Representatives, has passed a bill that would repeal No Child Left Behind. In my opinion, this is actually the best thing that could happen. And the reason why this is the best thing that can happen is because the No Child Left Behind is what gives the federal government all that muscle, right? If we don't have the threat of this of the accountability to the test at the state level, then much of this fear dissipates, right? That if Obama and Duncan don't have the power to wield over us in terms of us doing certain things, or we don't meet proficiency standards, we don't get these waivers, we don't meet these tests, if that doesn't exist, if states are accountable to themselves, which is the way it used to be, it's not necessarily the best answer, but it's much better than what we've got now. If states are accountable to themselves, then we don't have this overarching fear that crosses the entire country. And so the way that I see it is that there's really 2 things that we can do. I would say that the best option is to push states to take back local control of education, and that's extremely important. And so what does that mean? I think that means pushing the idea that we repeal No Child Left Behind at the federal level. It also means that we push our state legislatures to rethink Common Core, because as I've shown you here today, there's a lot of problems there, and we're heading off in this direction that might lead to number 2, which is implement the Common Core state standards and hope that boat that I was talking about earlier doesn't hit the rock. What I'd like to leave you with, and this is extremely important, you'll hear this many times, but do not let anybody convince you that asking why is not in your child's best interest. Many people are trying to shift the conversation from why to how. In other words, not why are we doing this, but how do we do it? And we skipped over the why. We almost completely ignored the why to get to the how. And if you don't ask the why, then you don't know if the how is even worth doing at all. Thank you. Hopefully I did all right on time.
You said that social studies is being pushed aside because of all, math and
Yes.
language arts, etc. But some of the social studies textbooks are being rewritten so badly that maybe that wouldn't be a bad idea.
Well,
teach at home social studies.
It's funny. I joke with my students a lot that the times when the social studies have been most important is when we have faced an external threat from communism. And so one of the things that I say is we need to go out and start a fake communist insurgency in this country. So
but
we can make history important again. But one of the reasons why social studies is is in trouble is because ever since the mid-90s when the national history standards were rejected, the social studies has essentially tried to make itself important by fitting in with everything else. And so as a result, rather than being true to just the social studies, they tried to be the jack of all trades and they become the master of none. And so yeah, it's a serious problem. Yes, ma'am.
How do we reach out to our legislators?
You know, that's actually a question that might be better asked to Debbie or somebody else like that. I think Grace would probably be a better person to answer that. Mostly what I do is what academics do. I stand up here and I talk and I write a blog and I write op-eds and stuff like that. And but for the most part, and I try to teach people about it. But in terms of political activism and getting involved politically, I spend so much of my time doing these other things that I try to educate as many people as I can so that they can do that, and then people like Grace and Debbie, sort of rustle up those efforts. So. Yes, sir.
Once the federal government gets so entangled in the education system, who gave them the right?
Well, it really began in 1965, and so I think what's really interesting is that, we see our rights as Americans taken away whenever we see this external threat, right? So let's think about like the Patriot Act of terrorism. We think about a nation at risk and economic competitiveness. When we see the Soviet Union and we see them launch Sputnik, Americans say, well, let's turn over some of our rights educationally in order to make sure that we have better mathematicians and scientists. And of course, the federal government attached a lot of money to that. And so there's always a lot of money attached to it. It's either withholding money as was done before, as Bush did, or it's promising more money as Obama and Duncan did. Oh, and one thing that I forgot to mention, I can't believe I forgot this, that $5 billion race to the top grants, not a single one of those has worked. That is $5 billion of the most wasted American tax dollars of all time. That is, it's unbelievable. These states competed for these programs. They got hundreds of millions of dollars from Obama and the federal government, and then they went out and did these things, and they've all failed to deliver what they promised. And, essentially because it's all based on a faulty assumption. It's all based on that faulty assumption that I mentioned before. So, yes, ma'am.
If states opt out, where does that leave them when the SAT and the ACT are going to be rewritten?
That's an excellent question. And here's what's interesting. So David Coleman, the guy who writes the Common Core for ELA, now is on the board of the College Board, right? So essentially the ACT and the SAT have been rewritten. So that's part of the rub, right? So I think that what we have to hope, as those people who would oppose the Common Core state standards in this way, is that if enough states do it, then they can't rewrite the ACT and the SAT. The problem is that so many people are afraid of what will happen to our kids if they're not ready for the ACT and the SAT that nobody wants to be that first person to jump, right? But my hope is that if enough people jump, if enough states jump, then that will be reconsidered. So, really, I don't have a better answer for you than that, unfortunately. Yes, ma'am.
Are you working with any state legislators right now currently that don't come up in 2 years with the verbiage to repeal Common Core?
No. I'm a teacher. I honestly, before Debbie invited me to do this, I haven't really done much other than teach my classes. I offer a class up at the U of A called Reclaiming the Conversation on Education, which is intended for public policy students at the U of A. Local teachers, really anybody that wants to take it. And it's about examining all of these things and finding ways to go out and spread the word in terms of what what we believe is right. And I'm an unabashed supporter of public education. I believe that public education is imperfect in this country, and one of the reasons why it's imperfect is because it really is one of our messiest systems. We have to educate everybody. That's what we do in the United States. But in order to do that, we have to have this inherently socialist program where we take tax money, we redistribute it. We have people that come from poor households that aren't educated, as well as kids who come from other households, and we want to fix that. And as I tell my students all the time, there's really no silver bullet that fixes that. And anytime that we're told that accountability will fix it, or that charter schools will fix it, or that any other of these reforms will fix it, you know, they're just selling you a bill of goods, because I've been doing this a long time, and I can tell you that there's no, I don't even know that there is an answer, really. I mean, this is the United States of America. We educate everybody. We do it in a way to try to give people as much choice as we possibly can, and as long as we do that, it's always going to be imperfect. Yes, ma'am.
I really wasn't going to get into this in our presentation, but I will tell you right now that I am working with legislators, and there is legislation to defund parts of this, but we're not there yet. And so the key is the legislators, the key is the legislation.
Yes.
You've got to get behind our people.
Did Arkansas, ma'am, did Arkansas receive funding, or was it just that we applied for funding?
No, we did not get no,
Okay, so we're held hostage to this, and
Right.
we received no funding.
Well, essentially, yeah, it was for those 40 points,
Right.
right? And so when that was done with Race to the Top, you got 40, I don't even know how many points the grant was worth, but 40 was apparently enough to make states jump on board with it. And so again, think back to the economic climate of late 2009, 2010, right? States, tax revenues are down, they're desperate for money, this money's going to fund education. Unfortunately, what's really ironic is that in many cases, the grants that states wrote to get this money, they were granted hundreds of millions of dollars, but the things that they promised that they would do actually costed them millions of dollars more than what they got. And so they spent all of this money to implement these and receive these grant monies, and then ended up wasting millions of more dollars of taxpayer money, and they all failed. You know, so I mean, it's essentially the bottom line is I have a poster that hangs in my office, and it's one of those deep despair, demotivator posters. It's got a picture of the Capitol building on it. It says, "Government, if you think the problems we create are bad, just wait till you see our solutions." And you know, I think that local control of schools, and when I say local control, one of the things that irks me most is that even teachers have lost local control, right? If the teachers can't even teach the way that they know is best to their kids, then we've really lost local control. Because one thing I was always able to do when I closed my door at the classroom was teach the way that I thought was best for my students, and I was highly trained to do that. And many teachers aren't able to do that today, so we've lost local controls of our classroom, of our schools, of our districts, and of our states in many ways. And I, you know, as a citizen and as a social studies educator who appreciates the 10th Amendment of the Constitution, you know, I just think that that's wrong. And you know, I strongly believe that we should be educating everybody as best that we possibly can. But that doesn't mean that we have to be educating them the same way. Yes, ma'am.
Curtis Coleman is one who is very much interested in putting the control of education back into local jurisdictions. And he has strong backbone and good plans to do it.
I honestly believe.
I encourage you to look at him.
I honestly believe that, I've been thinking about this a lot lately as I've mowed the lawn or done other things where I have a lot of time to think, is that politically, in our next presidential election, if a Republican candidate or any other candidate would promise to, as Mitt Romney actually did this last election, to return local control to the states, but is more descriptive of exactly what that would look like, that person would earn the votes of millions of public school teachers that would maybe not necessarily vote normally for Republican candidates. Because the days of the Democrats having public school teachers' best interest in mind, those days are over. You know, Rahm Emanuel in Chicago and others, you know, those days are over.
So what about the unions, though?
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. You know, the unions is another speech that I could give. Most people think that teachers' unions are far more ubiquitous and powerful than they actually are. They really only exist in that strength in large cities. But teachers' unions I tell my students this when we talk about this. In a lot of ways, we've brought this on ourselves as public educators, because for so long, we held up the hand and said, you can't make us change, you can't make us change. Our unions have protected the bad teachers with the good. You know, we're public education, you can't make us change. And then the federal government and others, like Michelle Rhee in Washington, D.C. and others, you know, they just brought out the sledgehammer and said, well, you know, if you're going to hold up your hand, then I'll bring a hammer and we'll knock that down. And now, because we held that flood back for 100 years, we're feeling the full force of it as public educators. And so, and just now, finally, we have people that are saying, all right, well, how do we evaluate teachers so that we make sure we get rid of the bad ones? Well, that was a question we should have been asking 100 years ago, not waiting until somebody, you know, kicked us around a little bit and then doing this. And the problem that we have now is that as public educators, because we've resisted this for so long, we have people that overreact and make it based only on test scores or only on, you know, and that's problematic. How a social studies teacher is held accountable for a test score when there's no social studies test is beyond me, but that's exactly what states are doing, because that was also a part of the No Child Left Behind waiver. So, you know, anyway, I probably have taken up too much time, so. I can keep answering questions if you'd like, or I can be done. I know there's other speakers.
Why don't you take one more?
Okay, one more. Yes, sir, in the green.
I've got two questions, actually.
Yeah.
The first question is, I understand that the state of Arkansas does not receive any money by signing off on this, but
Right.
have they applied for any grants?
They did apply to the Race to the Top grant, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. The second question I have is, one, I'm not an educator, but I have children in one of the local 4 districts.
Mm-hmm.
And I've also, which I've been in touch with the Arkansas Department of Education several times, as well as the district that my children go to. At the Arkansas level, they say that it's all the district's decision. Well, the district is saying, well, we can't get any information from the state.
Right.
So no one seems to be in charge, and what this local district has done was that if your child did not qualify to be placed into a certain class, if the parents raised enough cane, they actually allow the parents, or they're going to allow the parents to sign a waiver allowing them to take that class that would not be recommended based on the Common Core standards.
Yeah.
So now we're kind of backpedaling a little bit.
It's a mess.
Waiver.
Yes.
A waiver system to allow your child to let the parents have a say, if you will, what child or what your child should take.
Right, and you know, one of the biggest problems that we had actually this last academic year, was that we gave the benchmark test this year, but we also taught the Common Core state standards. So teachers were teaching both Common Core and the Arkansas frameworks at the same time. And as a result, you know, they were pulled in so many different directions. And so the one thing that I would say about this is that our research is showing that this looks very different in many different places. And those districts with more means tend to be implementing Common Core more, and they tend to also be more rigid in terms of their implementation, because they are seen as the leaders across the country, across the state, whatever it might happen to be. And so in many of those cases, there might not be that option, you know, so to speak. In other districts, they have really done almost absolutely nothing with Common Core so far, and so you might not even run into that situation. So I can't speak to every single example. I tell my students as I train them to go out in the classroom, I say, I can't tell you what this is going to look like. I can tell you what the extremes are. That's the first that I've heard of a situation like that. But the reason I go back and talk about the Arkansas frameworks in the Common Core is because when you have districts that are doing this as quickly as they are, and they're trying to implement these things as they are, and they're focusing so much on Common Core, and then you have some folks that are doing something a little bit. Again, it's just the idea that trying to do too much at one time is just not good for kids. And the way that these were implemented, I think it was, I don't want to misspeak, I think it was Kentucky or a few other states just went all 12 grades or all 13 grades at once, to Common Core. We're rolling it out here in the state of Arkansas, but many teachers, they get these kids in and they're in 9th, 10th grade, and these kids haven't been under Common Core for 7 or 8 years, and so they're expected to do this, but they've been prepared to do this because the Common Core is indeed more rigorous in a lot of ways than some state frameworks are in certain things. But yet they're required to teach here, rather than know where they know that their students are at. And so there's a sense of optimism in a lot of places that this will be better after we get the kinks worked out. And so that's one of the reasons why I reserve judgment in just saying this is going to be a bad thing. I don't know that it's going to be a bad thing. I just know that what's behind the scenes is not what it appears. And that's just as a citizen, That's what I have a problem with it the most. You know, I like to call it, it's not a conspiracy, but it's a racket. It's pretty close. And I think of it a lot like the mortgage crisis. You know, we had this deregulation, and then we had all of these, encouraging people to borrow all this money, and we did it, and it was all sort of behind the scenes, and then a lot of people made a lot of money, and they just took a lot of our money, and then they just walked away. And that same sort of thing could happen in education, except for now it's not just taxpayer money, it's your kids that they're walking away from. All right, thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Dr. Endacott. I don't know about you, but I learned an awful lot, and we've got more speakers coming up here that are filled with information. I have a couple of announcements in between. There is this Common Core booklet, and we have taken the position a bad choice for America, because I think we're proving to you through the speakers that this is a bad choice for America. There are booklets back there, and there's plenty of them. What we want you to do with all this literature is don't just take one, take what you think you can give out, and take it with you and get it out to parents and teachers. We're trying to educate the community. So take whatever you want back there, whatever you feel like you can get out, and you've got our website. There's a contact information email on there. If you need more, we will get it to you, okay? I also want to make a couple other announcements. We have a candidate running for state representative, Robin Lundstrom, in our audience, if she'll stand up. And Robin, you'll have to remind me of the district number, I don't know it.
District 87, just Silent Springs, Springdale, Elm Springs, and Pinetown, and I need all the help I can get.
She's running on the GOP ticket. And so we're delighted to have her here. We did invite many of our state legislators and senators here. They had some other activities. I think there was an ALEC meeting this weekend, and so there are a lot of them that are up there. Also, Antone, where are you? Antone is here, and he has a petition that is for the private option to be placed on the ballot so that people can vote, and Becky does too, right there. So if you would like to sign it, it's not for or against it, it's just for us to get it on the ballot. So if you would want to sign that, you do have to be a registered voter and 18 years old, et cetera, they'll tell you the details on that. So I'm going to move on here and get our next speakers up here. Grace Lewis is a mother of 4. She's a registered nurse from Mount Vernon, Arkansas. She started researching Common Core this year after concerns regarding her son's math schoolwork. And she and Patrick Richardson, who is also a speaker here today, created Arkansas Against Common Core website. Her topic is, what is Common Core and why should I care? And in addition, Betty Yerger has a master's degree in elementary education and secondary art education. She taught for 34 years, well seasoned, K through college in 4 different states. She holds an Arkansas Lifetime Teacher Certificate. She has taught in parochial, private, and public schools and was High School Teacher of the Year 1995 through 96 at West Carroll Parish. She taught regular classroom for 16 years and art education for 18 years. She studied watercolor painting in Scotland. She recently retired from teaching public school in 2012. Her topic is science and history standards. And they are going to come up and do their presentation for you. Feel free to get refreshments, and the bathroom is that way if you need it.
started researching Common Core this year after my son's math homework. I noticed there were lots of different ways that they were teaching it. He was coming home, he was crying, upset about the homework and everything. And so I started to research more into Common Core, and what I found, I was outraged, basically. I started calling legislators on the education committees and wanted to know, what are we doing about this? Other states, have legislation going on to stop this. What can we do? And we just recently had an informational hearing for our legislators on the education committee about Common Core. All right, so what is Common Core and why should I care? As we all know, that Common Core is basically supposed to be standards that are uniform across the United States. They say one of the things that is going to help is to get our kids prepared for college. What they don't tell you, though, is that the college they have in mind is your community college. It's a 2-year community college, not a university level, because of some of the ways they're teaching math. They also say that it's going to help our kids move state to state. According to the Bureau of Statistics, that's less than 2% of children that actually move state to state during the school year. So I don't think changing standards across the United States for 2% is really worth it. I'm going to go straight into the math, because that's what I had the issue with. I call it fuzzy math. They don't want our children to memorize their multiplication facts. Here are some examples. A standard algorithm is you're going to have the numbers stacked on each other, like 26 times 31, and then you're going to do the math underneath. Well, one of the ways they're teaching it is for the child to think deeply, to go more deeper into the concept. So we know 10 times 31 is 310, 20 times 31 is 620, plus the 155 equals 775, then I know 5 times 31 would be 155, and then 1 times 30. It would take my son, when he would do his math homework, 8 minutes to do a problem that when I did it with him would take him a minute. I don't feel like that's efficient, effective, and really going to teach our children to critically think like they say it is. Here's the lattice method. I'm not even going to really go into that, but he was in 1st grade, so this is the kind of stuff that we saw. Right here you'd have the triangle. So so-and-so's class set a goal to collect 50 cans by Friday. By Tuesday, the class had collected 27 cans. How many more cans do they need to reach the class goal? That's an easy math question. It shouldn't take doing all of this. Well, he would start crying, and, well, Mom, do I have the parts or do I have the whole? Because you have to put the whole at the top, the parts at the bottom. Or they could use this other method. Well, you can add, take away 10 and then take away, so forth. Like I said, it was not efficient, it was not quick, and it was not the most effective way of doing it. Same thing over here, 28 plus 29. That's not that hard to do, but they want you to do it a specific way. So if your child starts stacking the numbers like he did, it's wrong. You have to do it the way that they wanted it done in the classroom. This is Dr. James Milgram. He was on the validation committee to approve these standards. He is a professor at Stanford University, and he consults with NASA. He says the reason I didn't sign off on them is that they did not match up to international expectations. They were at least 2 years behind the practices in the high-achieving countries by the 7th grade, and only require a partial understanding of what would be the content of a normal, solid course in Algebra 1 and Geometry. Moreover, they cover very little of the content of Algebra 2 and none of any higher level course. They will not help our children to match up to the students in top foreign countries. I emailed Dr. Milgram when I found out about us having, the setting up, and I'm organized who is all going to speak, and he did speak at our hearing. He did a really good job. But to give you a little bit more information as to what they are taking out, there was an article that just came out yesterday, and it really addressed it really well. It says, my study comparing the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics Principles and Standards published in 2000, the previous standards. The study confirms that Common Core national standards will set our children back 1 to 2 years. The math standards specifically are markedly inferior to all 3 sets of standards used for comparison. So they're comparing to the Georgia standards. It says, so what are they missing? Probability, it's gone in elementary grades. Mean, median, mode, and range, gone in elementary grades. The concept of pi, including area and circumference of circles, gone in elementary grades. Division of a fraction by a fraction, gone in elementary grades. The fundamental theorem of arithmetic, prime factorization, gone completely. using fractions, decimals, and percentages interchangeably. So you know that 3/4 is 0.75, that's gone completely. Measurement including density, velocity, and scientific notation. And what they're saying is they want to go deeper into a smaller amount of subjects. But who is the one that gets to decide what things get left out? So yeah, there are some standards that are better than our previous Arkansas standards, but a lot of things are being left out too. Algebra, inadequate readiness in the elementary grades. Geometry, inadequate readiness in the elementary and middle grades. They go on to say, in addition, Common Core ignores advice from highly successful Asian nations to teach area and perimeter in the same grade level. The previous GPS taught these concepts together. Common Core does not. But Common Core proponents will argue that the National Council of Teachers of Mathematics supports Common Core. So the standards must be good. Unfortunately, that is not necessarily so. The council has been hijacked by political operators who are less interested in true mathematics education than in cultivating the good graces of the powerful entities behind Common Core, and perhaps reaping the rewards of doing business with these groups and marketing Common Core materials. Having taught elementary math for 9 years, I know students are capable of so much more than what Common Core requires. When our previous standards actually challenge students, why are we settling for the mediocrity of Common Core? So now we're going to go into Dr. Sandustovsky. She's from...
Was that an article from Dr. Wilbur that you...
No, that was not. No. I can send the article to you if you want it.
That'd be great.
Okay. Dr. Sandustovsky is from University of Arkansas. She was also on the validation committee. And back to Dr. Milgram, he was the only actual mathematician on the validation committee, just so you know. Dr. Sandustovsky was on for the ELA standards to sign off on those. And she said the reason that she didn't sign off on them, let's see, because they were so inadequate that she described them as empty skill sets that won't prepare students for authentic college coursework. She predicts that graduating seniors will have a reading level of 7th grade. The most serious problem with Common Core's ELA standards is the drastic de-emphasis on literature. Common Core emphasizes informational text to the detriment of creative literature. This is David Coleman, and he was the chief ELA architect that wrote the standards. And this is the reason that he put more emphasis on literature, is what he stated. He says, as you grow up in this world, you realize that people don't really give a beep about what you feel or what you think. It is rare in a working environment that someone says, Johnson, I need a market analysis by Friday, but before that, I need a compelling account of your childhood. He's mocking literature. He's basically saying, we don't need literature. It's not going to get you anywhere in the world. But what literature does for children is help them to critically think for themselves, to delve into these concepts all by themselves and come to conclusions on their own, not be informed by an informational text on how to think. I'm going to let Betty real quickly just kind of tell you about the science and history standards from the research that she has done.
In researching the science and the history standards, I don't want to hit any buttons up here and do something wrong. One of the things that really caught my attention right away was from the book, A Framework for the K-12 Science Education. I took selected topics out of that. Most of